Hello everyone, today I want to show you how to use HDRI environments to create a beautiful render in Blender 2.8. HDRIs are a great way to showcase your work. As an example, you can see in this image, this bicycle object was actually modeled by me, but the rest of the stuff is just an image, and I have used an HDRI environment to make this render look real. For this tutorial, I will assume that you already know your way around Blender and you know what HDRI environments are. I just want to share my workflow on how to use HDRIs in Blender 2.8. So this is not a tutorial for absolute beginners. So let's start. I will first create a simple scene. So let's make a cube here and also add a UV sphere. Go to the left viewport and I will try to position my objects just at the 0 for the z-axis, like so. It's just a rough estimation, doesn't need to be precise. And let's position them a little better, move the cube a little away from the sphere. Okay, I will turn on smooth shading for both of them. And for the cube, let's add a bevel modifier. Okay, and also a subdivision surface. Okay, let's add an edge here. Increase the width a little bit. Okay, that is smooth. That looks good. For the sphere, let's also add a subdivision modifier. Okay, it looks nice now. Now let's give some materials to these objects. Let's go to Shading tab and change the shading mode to Rendering and change the renderer to Cycles. Okay, let's delete the default light for the scene. There we go. And now set up our HDRI environment to light the scene. Now you can head over to your favorite browser to download some nice HDRI images. My favorite website and one I can easily recommend is hdrihaven.com. They have really good collection for high quality HDRI images, and they also have backplates for their HDRI images, which means that you can use high quality images as a background for your renders as well. And it's all free. If you want, you can support the website at Patreon. Let's use this one. Okay, I will download this 2K version of the HDRI. It's enough to give us good lights and reflections for our objects. And these are all the backplates that we can use as our background image, and I will use this one here. So their backplates are in 3 qualities. There is a raw, that is an image coming straight from the camera without any post-processing effects, a plain JPEG which is converted directly from that raw, and a pretty JPEG which has some Photoshop or post-processing applied to it. I will download this plain JPEG. After downloading our HDRI image and the backplate, let's set it up. In the shader editor, change this to world mode, and let's add an environment texture here. Open it up and select it. This is this one here. connect the color here, and you have nice environment. Now let's give some materials to our objects. For the cube, change to object here, create a new material, name it cube, and set the base color to this bluish color here. Maybe increase the roughness a little bit, decrease the specularity. Okay. And for the sphere, I want a chroming material. Let's name it first. Let's make it metallic, no roughness, and more specularity, so that we can see the reflection of our environment better. Now, to fit our objects according to the backplate image, we need to set up our camera angle and some of the camera properties. So head over to the Layout tab, select your camera. Okay, go to the camera, and let's see here. Open up the image properties, the details. You can see that the image has this dimension. So let's set up the render image size to be the same dimension, 7360 4912. This resolution is very high, so let's reduce the percentage to about 25. Now let's see the focal length of the camera. This is 38 millimeters. So go to camera here and set the focal length to 38. Press 0 on the numpad to see the camera angle. Now we can set our view to match the backplate. For this, we can take help from this background image option in camera. Check it and add an image, and let's add our backplate image, which is here. Now we need to move the camera so that it seems like these objects are part of the environment. For this, we can open up the N panel, pressing N here, and go to view and lock camera to view. Now we can move and the camera will stay in place. This is just some trial and error. If your scene has some straight lines, it can help a bit, so you can match the grid lines to the scene. This seems about right. Also add a plane to the scene. Let's first turn this off. And scale it a bit. We will use this plane to capture the shadows of these objects so that they appear to be part of this scene. This is very important for the final image. Now let's go to the shading to set up some final materials. First, we need to rotate our HDRI to match the backplate. This is to make sure that the lighting is correct according to the backplate. Okay, so to the environment texture, I will add mapping nodes, and this can easily be done using the Node Wrangler add-on and pressing Ctrl T. Okay, let's rotate this Z value here to rotate our environment. Okay, so camera, and you can use this alpha value for the backplate image to see. Okay, let's maybe it doesn't need to perfectly match the backplate, it just needs to look similar so that the final lighting calculations appear to be correct. Now let's set up a material for this shadow catcher object. First, I will change the name to shadow catcher, and let's set up a material for it. Add a new material and name it shadow catcher. Let's remove this principal BSDF and add a simple diffuse BSDF. For the color of the shadow catcher, I will try to reflect the environment into it so that in the end it also reflects the environment back to our 3D objects. It can be done without this step, but I find it adds a little bit of more realism to the objects. So let's copy the nodes from the world shader and go to object, paste them, copy the color here, and we need to set the scale to -1 and connect the texture coordinate reflection to vector. Okay, now you can see that it gets reflected, but the color doesn't seem to be correct. To color correct our material here, you can either correct the color on this object or correct the color for the environment. Let's go to the world shader. I will not explain how color correction works since I do not understand it very well myself. Instead, I can point you to this very good resource, Mesh Logic, and in this link the author Mickey has explained the exposure of HDRI environment and how to correct it very nicely. You can spend some time on it and try to understand it. I will instead use the node group that he has shared publicly on this website. Great thank you to him, and I will use it directly to fix my exposure. Okay, let's add it here. This is also included in my example file. Let's connect the world shader to surface. And this is mostly a trial and error for me. And so these are the properties that seems to work well for me. Let's turn off the background image for the camera. And it seems a bit okay. I think we need to correct the color of the shadow catcher plane as well. I will again use a node from the same website. Okay, let's image to, let's also add a black body node to set the color, and let's mix them. Add a mix node, mix RGB. Add the color here. Set the mix type to multiply. Set the temperature to 7000. Okay, now it seems to match more or less. So once again, to understand how I did this color correction, you can visit the link in the description of the blog Mesh Logic by Mickey, and you can also download his sample file, and these node groups are provided there. I will also include these node groups in my sample file, and you can use them to color correct your HDRI as well. Now let's set up our scene for render. We need to add some render passes to it. So in Blender 2.8, what you need to do is add new view layers here at the top right corner, and then you can use it to configure your render passes. So the first view layer, I will name it 3D objects, and let's add this cube and sphere to a new collection, also called 3D objects. Okay, and the shadow catcher to another collection called shadow catcher. Okay, so for this render layer 3D objects, I need this 3D objects, the camera, and for the shadow catcher I only need its indirect influence, so the reflection from it. So let's set it. So it's gone now. Let's add a new view layer here and let's call it shadow catcher. And for this one, for 3D objects, we can set it to set indirect only. So now they only have their shadow casted on the shadow catcher plane. And add a new layer here, call it shadow catcher clean. And for this one, we will disable the 3D objects entirely. One more thing, we need to set up an index for our shadow catcher object. So go to this property here and let's go to relations and pass index to 1. Okay, and for this render pass shadow catcher clean, let's enable object index as well. Okay, let's try to render it now. Let me just check the properties. 128 performance 64. Let's turn to GPU. Let's tile to 256. 256. Go to your render tab here and set it to transparent. Okay. Okay, press F12. And it starts rendering. So after rendering is finished, head over to Compositing workspace and click Use Nodes, and we can start compositing our final image. Okay, let's first add our image here. This is the backplate image that we wanted to use. Connect it to your output and you can select here your composite. The image is too big, so we need to scale it. So add scale and you can set it to render size. Okay, now it looks good. Let's add our render layers here as well. Set this one to shadow catcher clean and this one to the shadow catcher. Now first we will isolate our shadow from the scene. To do this we need to divide our shadow catcher from our shadow catcher clean. Okay, let's do this. Get a mix node over here and let's plug it here and here and change the mix type to divide. We can view the result of this image by plugging this image node to image here and you can see. Okay, let's now add the shadows to our backplate. For this we need a mix node once again. Connect this to the lower input, this to the upper input, and it doesn't do much. We need to set this to multiply. Okay, and we need to use our index object here. So use ID mask. Connect this index object output to the ID value here and alpha to effect. and we need to send the index value here to the index of the object, which we set as 1. Okay, now the shadows are there. Let's add our 3D objects to the scene. We can add them using an alpha over node. Let's connect the 3D object render pass to this input here and the output from this node to image here, and let's see our result. So there you are, the objects have been added to this image. One thing that I'd like to do is to play around a little bit with the RGB values for the shadows so that we can make it match the image more. Something like this. Okay, and you can also play with the RGB values of the 3D objects. So this is it for now. This is how you can easily set up your HDRI renders for Blender 2.8. Until next time, goodbye.